Hello, good afternoon. This is Al24 Breaking News and starting our main headlines. France top diplomat Le Dorian called on Wednesday for an easing of tension with Algeria. NATO Secretary General demanded that Russia de-escalate its conflict with neighboring Ukraine in a bid to resolve the crisis politically. Munich, Germany's third largest city, held a protest against a pandemic vaccine mandate and other restrictions related to the pandemic. Hello and welcome those who are today's headlines. First, in our top stories, French Foreign Minister Le Dorian visited Algeria, during which he met Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune as well as the Algerian counterpart Mtala Mamra in hope of decreasing tension between the two sides after Macron's statements, which Algeria dealt with firmly and summoned to the Algerian ambassador to France as a result.
The President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, on Wednesday received the Minister of Europe and French Foreign Affairs, Jean-Yves Le Drian, in hopes of resolving the misconception between Algeria and France. France was Algeria's first economic partner, succeeding in major deals, but its official position with Algeria differed in the last 2 years, as the political relations between the two countries have witnessed many phases of ambiguity on the French side in dealing with sensitive Algerian issues. French President Emmanuel Macron's statements reported by Le Monde newspaper caused a real diplomatic crisis with Algeria, which led Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune to quickly ban the military airspace for French planes heading to the African coast and summon French ambassador to Paris. At that time, Macron realized his sin and took the initiative to apologize in a statement published by the Élysée, confirming his respect for the Algerian nation, its history and its sovereignty. Algeria, which did not like Macron's move, did not react to the statement of the Élysée, and once again, President Tebboune assured the German newspaper Der Spiegel that he will not be the person who takes the first step, so the message was clear and explicit. In the past months, the French authorities have continued to provoke Algeria, such as reducing the number of visas, handling the memory file, and ignoring the compensation demands for the victims of nuclear explosions. Le Drian came to Algeria then, carrying a number of messages, including letters of apology for what Macron had done to soften the atmosphere, and others to beg Algeria's help in issues to the African coast.
U.S. President Joe Biden confirmed on Wednesday that the United States will not send troops to Ukraine to defend it in light of the increasing Russian military buildup on its eastern border, but expressed confidence that his warning message has reached his counterpart of Russia. Hassan Burkan on what follow.
U.S. President Joe Biden said that his country's sending of troops to Ukraine is not on the table amid the escalating crisis between Kiev and Moscow. Joe Biden stated that the duty of the United States to protect NATO allies if they are attacked does not include Ukraine, because it is not a member of the alliance, and added that such a step would lead to unprecedented severe punitive measures from the United States and its allies against Russia.
That is not on the table. What is not on, they are not. We have a moral obligation and a legal obligation to our NATO allies. If they were to attack under Article 5, it's a sacred obligation. That obligation does not extend to NATO, to Ukraine, but it would depend upon what the rest of the NATO countries were willing to do as well. But the idea of the United States is going to unilaterally use force to confront Russia invading Ukraine is not in the cards right now. But what will happen is there will be severe consequences that will have.
For its part, Vladimir Putin revealed that Moscow will present its proposals for a security dialogue with Washington next week, denying the existence of any aggressive intentions by Russia, which will not remain indifferent about the possible expansion of NATO towards its limits.
Yes, we did talk about regional issues, talked about the conflict in southeastern Ukraine, and another very sensitive topic related to this situation, namely the expansion of the NATO bloc to the east, including at the expense of Ukraine. This is one of the key issues of ensuring Russia's security in the medium and even strategic perspective. We talk about this constantly, publicly, and warn our partners that this is unacceptable for us.
It is noteworthy that NATO expansion east is considered as a threat and a red line by the Kremlin, and that Russia is negotiating legally binding deal with the West to stop this expansion.
President Joe Biden is ready to urge participants at the first ever White House Summit for Democracy to reverse an ongoing recession of democracy that is playing out at a time of rising authoritarianism around the globe, extraordinary strains on foundation institutions in the U.S. Marwa Bil'iwar on what's follow.
The two-day virtual summit has already faced backlash from some of the United States' chief adversaries and other nations that were not invited to participate. The ambassadors to the U.S. from China and Russia wrote a joint essay in the National Interest Policy Journal describing the Biden administration as exhibiting a Cold War mentality that will stoke up ideologies, confrontation, and rift in the world. Biden has made promoting democratic values a focal point of his foreign policy and has repeatedly stressed the need for the U.S. and other like-minded allies to demonstrate that democracies are a better vehicle for societies than monocracies.
Still works, that our government still works, and we can deliver for our people.
However, U.S. democracy faces grave challenges to its institutions and traditions. As a result, the summit has been allocated as an opportunity for leaders and civil society experts from some 110 countries to collaborate on fighting corruption and promoting respect for human rights. Chinese officials have offered a stream of public criticism about the summit along with Russia. China's foreign ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian said this week, with such human rights tragedies, how can the U.S. defend democracy?
There was a poll released before saying that 44% of people around the world believe the United States is the greatest threat to global democracy, and 81% of American people believe that American democracy has been facing a serious domestic threat.
They have also expressed outrage over the administration inviting Taiwan to take part in the gathering. China claims this self-governing island as a part of its territory and objects to it having any contact on its own with foreign governments.
Yesterday's night, Munich, Germany's third largest city, held a protest against pending vaccine mandates and other restrictions related to the pandemic. As Dutch press reported with reference to the police, about 1,000 people gathered on Whitblash Square on Wednesday evening. Opponents of a mandatory vaccination and strict restriction carried a poster that read "Munich fights for rights and freedoms." Some held Bavarian flags and shouted "Freedom, how they walk." Federal and regional leaders agreed to impose stricter restrictions on the unvaccinated earlier this month. New German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has said compulsory vaccination is expected to come into effect early March if the measure is approved by the Parliament. And for more on this situation in Munich, we are joined live by Rushdie Saihi, who is a journalist there. Mr. Rushdie, first of all, why do people refuse this new COVID measures restriction?
نعم أهلا وسهلا. طبعا هناك أسباب عديدة تؤدي بالخروج إلى الشارع والألمان للخروج إلى الشارع ورفض هذا اللقاح الذي تنوي الحكومة إجبارية تعميمه على هم ما زالوا لغاية الآن لم يتم إقرار قانون يجبر
because no laws were put now in order to make it compulsory for Germans to get vaccinated.
الحكومة الجديدة سوف تتعارض مع ما يكفله الدستور.
There might be some conflict concerning the reaction of the new government that is going to start with Olaf Scholz. Another number of Germans refusing the vaccination just because they are still in fears that the vaccines are not still valid and they are still under even concerning the side effects of these vaccines. People fear the spread of the virus and are afraid from the period that follows the vaccination.
Mr. Rushdie, how will the new government deal with this situation represented in Olaf Scholz, and what possible challenges are facing this new government?
Yes, apparently the new government of Olaf Scholz has officially yesterday is going to move on forward into imposing vaccination on all Germans. This German Chancellor, he has actually said that the members of the parliament, that by the end of the year, they are going to validate a new law imposing vaccines on all Germans as a way of curbing the virus.
لذلك يتوجب التصويت عليه حسب المستشار الجديد في البوندستاج قبل نهاية هذه السنة.
Before the end of the year.
التي تدل على مضي الحكومة لذلك.
And the signs that show that the German government is moving on in this step
الذي طالما كان ينادي بإجبارية التلقيح في
is one of the members of the government who called several times on moving on in this decision, that is of imposing vaccines on all Germans.
Mr. Rushdie Shtayyeh joined us from Germany, and Algerian journalist. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Through a different matter, Australian government follows the same stream of the United States and New Zealand in boycotting the next Olympic Games that will be held next year, 2022, in China, claiming that the Chinese government has refused to sit for talks with world powers of the unhumanitarian acts that Beijing is committing on the territories of Uyghurs group. Ayadi Usama on what follow.
China's Winter Olympics are likely to be minus 3 countries on diplomacy level, as US and New Zealand announced their diplomatic boycott to the 2022 Olympic Games that would be held in China.
The Biden administration will not send any diplomatic or official representation to the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics and Paralympic Games, given the PRC's ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity in Xinjiang and other human rights abuses. The athletes on Team USA have our full support. We will be behind them 100% as we cheer them on from home, but we will not be
Today's declaration of Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison of boycotting the next February Olympics in China argued that the latter is unwilling to talk over human rights abuse conducted against Uyghurs.
The Australian government will not be sending any official representatives to the forthcoming Winter Games.
Australian Olympics Committee said the boycott will not have any effect on its athletes who are preparing to participate in the game. China on its part imposed punitive measures against Australian goods in the Chinese market, which triggered Australia's Morrison to object these measures. As a part of joining this boycott campaign, British Prime Minister's spokesman announced that his country is yet to take a final decision over whether his country will take the same stream as Australia, the USA and New Zealand. For their part, New Zealand officials stated that their government is unwilling to sit the next pandemic talks with the Chinese government as a reaction to the Chinese officials' acts.
So we've already made clear that we won't be represented there at a ministerial level. We made that clear to China, I think, in October. And so for us, that's a decision we've already made. Range of factors, but mostly to do with COVID and the fact that the logistics of travel and so on around COVID are not conducive to that kind of.
In the same line of thoughts, on Thursday, China condemned the decision of 4 countries who announced a diplomatic boycott of the upcoming Winter Olympics in Beijing next year, warning that they would pay the price if this happened. Chinese Foreign Minister spokesman Wang Wenbin told reporters that those countries that will send athletes to the Olympics, but not official ones, will pay the price. After the United States and Australia, Britain and Canada announced on Wednesday a diplomatic boycott of the Olympic Games to denounce human rights abuses in China. According to British health officials, Omicron new variants could lead to 1 million infections on month, and this British Health Minister Sajid Javad stated that public anger over the last video of Party the Street staff joked of having. Furthermore, British Health Minister implored the population by the new restriction revealed by the Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Health Minister added that acting now against the spread of the last variants will prevent from the lockdown later. New measures and restrictions are brought back around the world as countries note a rise in COVID-19 cases. The UK announced its Plan B at the time when Omicron seems to be a fast-spreading variant, and some experts said that a third dose is inevitable for better protection against the new virus. More with Nabil Khazini.
As we learn more about the Omicron coronavirus variant and Delta continues to cause COVID-19 cases to rise around the world, new measures are being taken. In the UK, Boris Johnson announces Plan B restrictions, including face masks in more settings, COVID passes in large venues and working from home guidance.
We will reintroduce the guidance to work from home. Second, from this Friday, we will further extend the legal requirement to wear a face mask to most public indoor venues, including theatres and cinemas. We'll also make the NHS COVID pass mandatory for entry into nightclubs and venues where large crowds gather.
But will these measures really help in controlling the spread of the virus? Some have called it a battle, and experts have their opinion.
Well, it's going to be very hard to control. It's much more transmissible than Delta. But the silver lining in that cloud is that it may be less severe. So a losing battle may be not the right term. It may be actually to our advantage. We have to wait and see. The data will come through in the next few days.
The US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention recommends booster doses for all adults who received their second dose at least 6 months ago. Vaccine makers have known for months now that the immunity vaccines elicit against COVID-19 can wane over time, leading to the need for a booster dose. The boosters appear to restore immunity to where it was initially.
What we're seeing with Omicron is similar to the story with Delta over the summer. The variant has changed a bit, which means that the vaccine that we all received, which was generated against the original version of the virus, isn't quite as effective. But it's still very effective, especially with our cellular immune defense.
While experts debate the efficacy of booster shots against COVID-19, thousands of people in many cities around the world gather to voice their opposition against making vaccination for the unvaccinated people mandatory. Some demonstrations turned into riot and authorities used forces to control the chaos. The new German health minister Karl Lauterbach seems to be optimistic that the world will defeat the coronavirus and will be better equipped for further pandemics. 2 years after the first coronavirus was detected in China, the world today is still split as to what is the best way humanity should take to tame this pandemic and to make an end of it.
Military helicopter crashes in Tamil Nadu state killed India's Defense Chief General Bipin Rawat, his wife and 11 other people. The Russian-made Mi-17 F-5 helicopter was on its way from an Air Force base to Defense Service staff colleague when it crashed. The reason for the crash was not immediately known, and the authorities said that they have opened an investigation. The Air Force said one officer, Group Captain Vargo Singh, survived and is being treated in a military hospital. World Power and the International Atomic Energy Agency are preparing to resume Iran talks in Vienna on Thursday. On another front, the U.S. Defense Department is planning for a meeting with Zionist Defense Minister to discuss the possibility of military drills in preparation for a worse scenario. Usama Yadon, what's follow?
Vienna nuclear talks on reviving the nuclear deal of 2015 have come to no end, especially after the stutter of diplomacy and the last declarations of France's foreign minister, as he expressed his concern, fearing that Iran is playing for time. The talks are scheduled to resume on Thursday, as the U.S. Special Envoy Robert Malley returns to Vienna for the weekend to further discuss the Iranian nuclear practices. Defense leaders of the United States and the Zionist entity are to meet on Thursday as a backup plan in case the talks with Iran do not bring any final results. The leaders will consider the possibility of military drills for Iran, as a worst-case scenario preparation. Diplomacy failure risks military measures that will be imposed to destroy the Iranian nuclear facilities. U.S. officials declined to give further information concerning the potentially military exercises, while Iranian government still insists that nuclear practices in their country have no nuclear weaponry purpose, stating that they just seek to master nuclear technology. Zionist defense minister stated in a post that these discussions will analyze the possible modes of action that will ensure cessation of Iranian efforts to enter the nuclear sphere. Another issue that officials expressed their fear about is their ability to detect and destroy the dispersed components of what they call the Iranian nuclear weaponization program, once enough fissile for a bomb was produced.
This year has seen waving clashes between rival armed groups allied with government and opposition forces in South Sudan, killing thousands of civilians and giving a free rein to unimaginable violence which could be considered as a war crime. More details with our friend Islam Seed.
According to an investigation conducted by Amnesty International, fighters were documented mercilessly murdering, mutilating citizens and completely demolishing villages during an outbreak of violence in western Equatoria State from June to October this year. Clashes have occurred in Tambora County between rival local groups connected with forces affiliated with the government's South Sudan People's Defense Forces on one hand and the Sudan's People Liberation Army in opposition on the other. According to reports, the continuous fighting led civilians to an unimaginable violence, possibly amounting to war crimes.
They ordered us to sit down and said they were going to slice us like a pumpkin. One of the fighters put his leg on my sister's head and cut her neck with a knife.
Tambora County saw ethnic clashes after politicians emphasized local grievances and stimulated young individuals to take up weapons. Amnesty International's director for East and Southern Africa, Deprose Machena, has said in a statement that the testimonies they have gathered speak of an unimaginable violence, including civilians killed as they fled and bodies set on fire and mutilated.
A trail of death, destruction and division ensued after politicians wiped up ethnic hatred and mobilized youth to fight. The testimonies we have gathered speak of an unimaginable violence, including civilians killed as they fled and bodies set on fire and mutilated.
Following South Sudan's independence in 2011, the country descended into a brutal civil war, killing 400,000 people and driving millions to escape.
My child at home is very sick, and there is no money for treatment. We don't have food. We don't even have money for rent. We are going to die from hunger.
In spite of the signed ceasefire, key provisions of the peace agreement have not been applied yet, and fighters loyal to each man are bitterly divided.
Burkina Faso President Kabore fired his prime minister at a time that the country known as escalation security crisis that has killed thousands and led to street protesters calling for his removal. The president's office said Kabore had received a resignation letter from Prime Minister Christophe Dabir. The resignation of Prime Minister required the resignation of the entire government, according to Burkina Faso law. New Zealand has decided to prohibit young people from ever purchasing cigarettes in their lives in one of the strongest anti-tobacco measures in the world, claiming that earlier initiatives to eliminate smoking were taking too long in 2017. No one under the age of 14 will be permitted to buy cigarettes in the 5 million strong Pacific nation, according to measures presented on Thursday, which also included limiting the number of outlets authorized to sell tobacco and lowering nicotine levels in all products. Ending up with sport, Barcelona crashed out of the UEFA Champions League following a 3-9 defeat by Bayern Munich, failing to make it past to the group stage of the competition for the first time since 2001. Benfica's victory over Dynamo Kiev means that the Bulgarian will have to settle, the Blaugrana will have to settle for the Europa League after the new year. Barcelona signed off the worst Champions League campaign in 2 decades on Wednesday, as another comprehensive defeat at the hands of Bayern Munich sealed elimination at the group stage. More results over yesterday's games in this board. This and ladies and gentlemen, let's have a reminder for our main stories. France's top diplomat Le Dorian called on Wednesday for an easing of tension with Algeria during a visit to Algeria after unacceptable statements from the president toward the Republic of the State. NATO Secretary Generals demanded that Russia de-escalate its conflict with neighboring Ukraine in a bid to resolve the crisis politically. Munich, Germany's third largest city, held a protest against a pending vaccine mandate and other restrictions related to the pandemic. That's all what we have for now. Stay tuned for our 6 p.m. edition. Goodbye.